Hello students, welcome to week 2 for COM525 Media Effects on Communication Behavior. This week our central theme and idea relates to hegemony and social perceptions of that. The chapters that we're reading through this week, or the articles really, like I mentioned before, deal specifically with those ideas of hegemony and social perceptions. So our lecture is going to focus on that today. If we look at our week 2 agenda, you can see what our readings are here. We should begin reading our social constructionism PDF. I have a copy of the text here for those of you that may have purchased it. However, the PDF is on Blackboard for you, so you do not have to purchase it if you want. You have a paper due on that book in week 6. This is a very relevant topic to media effects. We look at social constructionism, and we'll go through this later in coming weeks. And social constructionism really looks at how we construct reality based off of pre-existing knowledge and observation. So it's very related to what we're doing in this course, and so it's important you read that text and have a good firm understanding of that text. We're in chapters 6 and 7 this week, and those deal with the topic areas that we'll be looking at in this week's lecture. You have a critical review due as well as your midterm topic. It is important to know that these critical reviews are due, the original posts are due on Thursday, and just like all our discussion boards, and the reply posts are due on Sunday. So do keep that in mind going forward. Oh, I can't write with the pen very well, so just keep that in mind. It's due on Thursday. Your reply posts are due on Sunday. The digital media project, that's your midterm. We'll be assigning that formally this week. Your topic for that is due this week as well. You have a couple of videos to watch. They're not too long in length. The longest one is on hegemony, which is your 10-minute philosophy. Very broad and basic overview of what that is, and we'll be talking about that here in our lecture this week. Your critical review number 1 asks you to choose any theory in the course text. So when I say course text, I mean any theory from this text that's listed. That's within any of the readings that we may have considered. So this week, for example, we're in chapters 6 and 7, or articles 6 and 7. We're looking at social cognitive theory, which is also known as social learning theory. That's in this lecture. And we're looking at elaboration likelihood model of persuasion and its use in mass media. It probably would be in your of good interest to you to use one of those theories, because you're getting really pointed instruction on that this week. However, if you want to choose any of the other theories within this text, like cultivation theory, spiral of silence, framing theory, social reality, any of those things like that, uses and grats, feel free to do so. It just has to occur within this particular text. Why? Because we want to look at media effects, and we want to get to know those theories at a deeper level. In this paper, it will be 3 pages of written content, so that's not including your cover page and abstract as per formal APA guidelines. And each page should cover one of the 3 assignment instructions listed below. So the first thing you're going to do is give us a broad overview of the major concepts and elements in this theory. Thoroughly tell the reader what it is and what we need to know about it. 2, you're going to analyze the strengths and weaknesses. So thoroughly tell us, based off of your 3 to 4 outside sources, the strengths and weaknesses of the theory. So clearly tell us the theory is strong in this area, and because so-and-so said so, or however you want to say that in obviously a more graduate level and academic way. So analyze the strengths and weaknesses, use your sources to support that. The third thing you're going to do is comment on the theory. Tell me your own scholarly opinion about it and how it relates to what we know about media effects communication theories and what we're learning in the course. So each of those is about a third of the entire paper. So if the paper needs to be a minimum of 3 pages, each of those should be about a page or so. So keep that in mind. When you're writing your assignment, make sure you keep in mind that you do need to post your original response by Thursday, and then post your replies no later than Sunday. So do get your paper up there in the discussion board early. Please keep this method going forward. Make note of it in your calendar and things of that nature. All discussion board posts are due on Thursday no matter what throughout this semester, and then your replies are due by Sunday. And that's really just to provide everybody with ample time to go through and really critically evaluate what you're saying. The goal of this assignment is for you to end the semester with 4 original critical reviews that you've written where you've fully explored some theories that we're going through in this media theory course. And then you can kind of draw on some of those opinions from there, possibly use it in your capstone master's thesis project class when you get to the end of your degree program, or in any case, just have them for your own reference. Additionally, it will help you to look and read it to everybody else's. That's why you need to read at least 3 other students. And then you'll have more. You'll have everyone else's to refer to and use as a point of reference going forward. And you'll find it to be very helpful. We're going to complete about 4 of these in this semester. So it's going to become pretty routine to you by the end of the term, and shouldn't be any issue going forward. If you have a specific question, please let me know, and I will help address that question early on this week. The next thing we're going to look at is our midterm topic selection. So this digital media in the church project is designed to give us an outside experience, a different experience in looking at media effects and determining how we're going to analyze that. So instead of just writing a paper or looking at a theory, what you're going to do is you're going to look at how digital media, meaning social media or actually any form of media today that we use, influences the church in some way, or church practice in some way. So you're going to utilize specific chapters from the text and scholarly articles that you use from your critical reviews, as well as outside sources, to determine how digital media effects influence the church. What you're going to do particularly is you're going to pick something. You're going to look at the use of live streaming a sermon, or you're going to look at the use of social media practice by pastors, or whatever it may be, to examine how we use these mediated tools to interact with one another and how it may be changing the church positively or negatively. So it's a twofold assignment. You'll be writing a paper that's that's no less than 5 pages, providing a detailed overview of digital media and how it may have influenced the church in some way related to your topic, or how it may not have helped the church. You'll pick a specific position on the usefulness or hurtfulness of this specific type of media and church practice, fellowship, and such, and explain how this mediated practice helps or does not help the church, and evaluate it. So look at social media outlets, blogging from chat pastors, live stream, online giving. There's a lot of churches that allow online giving now, to determine its usefulness for church practice. So we're looking at here, we're putting on our communication scholars hats, because that's what you're aspiring to be as a grad student in this MAC program. And you're determining, okay, let me look at some use of digital or new media tools and how it may be helping the church. You don't have to look at a church specifically. If you could provide examples, that would be great. That would be really great. It'll help support whatever argument you're making, but you can just talk in general terms. You can talk in general terms of the usefulness of blogging for pastors, or looking at how live streaming of services helped connect people around the world, or whatever you want to do. But what we're looking at is looking at how these media tools that we're looking at, the effects of them, generally speaking, relate to the pursuit of Christ, Christianly thinking, and the church. And so think about that. And in your paper, you're going to establish the usefulness, explain the tools and things of that nature to help us understand what it is you're getting at. And then the second part, which is also due in a couple weeks, is to create a plan, a brief digital media plan. And in this plan, it's going to be about 4 pages or so too. Students will provide a situation analysis, competitor analysis. I'll give you some more examples of this in week 3, as well as goals and objectives and tactics and execution of the plan for a church to utilize this specific digital media tool. So you'll come up with a communication strategy and plan that the church can use to implement blogging for pastors, or live stream, or online giving, or whatever it is that you've chosen to look at, Instagram, Snapchat, whatever it may be, and provide that. So it's twofold. You have the paper where you're providing your academic and scholarly ideas on that, and then you have the plan, which is like about a 3-page plan, if so, that's firmly going to tell a church how they could implement this. So we're stretching our brains in different ways to get this assignment completed, but we're looking at this particularly related into how we can really live out our Great Commission and spread the gospel utilizing some of these tools in the church today. So this week, what you're going to do is address these 3 questions here, no more than a couple sentences or so, telling me what your topic is. I want to know what your topic is and why, how is it relevant to the digital media practices, and how is it possibly relevant to implementation in the church. And I just want that so I can start to get a good idea of how that may relate to your area of exploration and what you'll be studying to help give you some guidance on that if needed. And so that's what you'll be doing this week. Next week we'll have more formal overview of what to put in your paper and in your plan. This week we're just starting to get things going. I want to give you a brief overview of hegemony because this is a reoccurring theme this week in a lot of the readings. As we looked at ideology last week, which was great, we're going to connect the dots here with hegemony because the two really go together. So reviewing, ideology is related to concepts such as worldview, belief systems, and values. It's really concerned with what messages these images send about the nature of the world and how it operates and how it should be. So going forward, we're looking at mediated messages, the images these media messages send about the nature of the world, how it operates and should be. Ideology is our worldview, belief system, values, what we make value judgments based off of what we know, inform opinions on things. It's what we think about something. It's our ideological perspective, our value judgment system perspective on a given topic. This relates to hegemony because hegemony connects questions of culture, power, and ideology. Really, in a nutshell, hegemony considers or shows that there's a dominant group that exerts cultural and social control over another group. So there's one group that's in power that's exerting control and power socially, primarily through the use of media, over another group. So there's a dominant group that's injecting its ideology and using that power to inject its ideology over another group through the use of media. In this sense, Gramsci really told us that hegemony or power is wielded at the level of culture and ideology, not through just force, meaning violence force, that we can exert opinions about things based off of just having media control and power or social control and power over a group. Hitler is was one of the most famous examples of this, with spreading his hate and propaganda towards Jews. This is an example of hegemony, using it negatively, and a group having power and dominance over another group ideological perspectives. It's also argued that a ruling or majority group can maintain power through force, consent, and a combination of the two. It's really considered to be some form of ideological domination, but done in a very subtle way and exerting its control. And the most common way and basic assumptions of how this works is through media, some form of media, written, television, things of that nature. And so it's really important to understand that as we look at media effects, because one direct effect of media is usually ideology and hegemony, the exertion of power and control over from a dominant group to a less dominant group. And that's really important to keep in mind, especially as we evaluate things like things we watch on the news, TV shows, things of that nature. What are the producers and the creators' perspective on life can come out in those shows, and is that some form of hegemonic control, or is that some form of just trying to express yourself? And these are the questions we're constantly battling with and asking ourselves as we move through evaluating media and looking at media effects. Elaboration likelihood theory is used in chapter 7 this week within that article. And so I really wanted to spend a couple of minutes looking at that, if you can spend a couple of minutes, on how elaboration likelihood theory is used so you can determine how mass media attitudes can change. So ELT tells us that the probability that we evaluate information critically occurs in a number of two ways cognitively. So this theory is more of an information processing theory. It's rooted in a socio-psychological tradition and focuses on the communicator. Petty and Capaccio really said that ELT is the probability that we evaluate information from a critical perspective, and is a persuasive theory that is used to predict how and will not be, how and will, when, excuse me, how you may or may not be persuaded by various media messages. And so what's very, very important, or just messages in general, but in this sense, for this article, it's related to media messages. So they tell us that all information is received via two routes: the central route, where critical thinking occurs, and the peripheral route, where more passive or low involvement processing is required to make a decision or a judgment based off of how we're going to be persuaded by a particular message. The scholars tell us that there are three types of motivation where this occurs at. The first one is involvement. It's our personal relevance to the topic. How involved and how related are we to that topic? How much do we care about it? How much does it mean to us? And so on and so forth. The second one is diversity of argument, which deals with how the information is presented to us and how maybe the diversity or the differences in the way that the information is presented to us can sway us to more likely accept or reject the message in a certain way. And traditionally, what Petty tells us is that if information comes from a variety of sources, we're more likely to critically think about it than if it comes from one source. So if we hear something about the flu vaccine from the news, and then we see it in a newspaper, and then we see it on a blog, and we see some posts on social media, and then our friends tell us, and then we receive a mailer in the mail, we're more likely to critically evaluate something, really think about it, and form an opinion about it before we accept it, rather than using the peripheral route where we may just say, oh, it's just the news telling us some other thing about a vaccine. I'm not going to listen to what it has to say. And so that's really what happens with diversity of argument. The last one, and the third type of motivation, is the personal predisposition. That's the likelihood you have to naturally critically think about something. We know we may have friends, or we may ourselves be that type of person that never accepts anything at face value, that always has to look at every single thing and evaluate everything from a very deep level. Or we may be that person that generally just accepts something. If we hear it on the news, then we know, okay, let's not get the flu vaccine this year because they said it's bad, or whatever it may be. And so your personal predisposition to naturally accepting and critically thinking about things has a huge influence on the motivation you are for accepting messages that are trying to persuade you either way on a topic. Going forward, I want to show you this model. This really helps kind of paint the picture. So if we look here, you can see that we have, get my pen out. You can see here we have our communication. Once we've received the information from an SMR model, a source, message, receiver, or channel, we then have to provide attention and comprehension to it. Once we've comprehended it and attended to it, excuse me. Once we've applied attention to it and comprehension to it, we are either going to pass it through the central route, which involves high involvement processing, or how we're going to think very deeply and critically about it before we provide a cognitive response that results in a belief or attitude change to then a behavior change. The high involvement processing influences our behavioral predisposition to being persuaded by a message. Or we're going to decide, it's not something I care about that much, and it's going to go through the peripheral route, and it's going to involve low involvement processing to belief, change, or attitude. So if I hear something on the news, or I see a political ad, for example, telling me to vote a certain way or something, and then you find out it's endorsed by the candidate that is running against the other candidate, it may go through the peripheral route. You may know intrinsically, I'm not going to believe that, because obviously they're going to say what they want to say because they want me to vote for them. Rather, if you see an independent mailer or an independent commercial, you might process it through the central route and say, I need to think about this a little more deeply. So ELT really looks at how we evaluate information and process information and the likelihood of us being persuaded by a message utilizing one of the two routes. And so for this sense, and media studies and looking at media effects, it's very profound. A lot of mass media communicators, or people that have their masters in communication, go into communication director positions, can use a theory like this to predict how likely somebody is to respond to a given situation or a message they may be trying to send to another person. The next theory is social learning theory, which is referred to in the text as social cognitive theory. They're both accepted terms and are both used interchangeably from one another. So social learning theory was developed by Albert Bandura in the 50s or 60s. It came out of his famous Bobo the Doll experiment, looking at how people relate to what they know about something. Really what it is it tells us that learning is a cognitive response that relies on social observation and and influence. Bandura has told us that we learn everything through observation and modeling. Not a single thing comes through us if we have not observed it or seen it modeled for us before. So it really starts at childhood. When we observe our parents, when we observe what we watch on TV, or when people model certain social behaviors for us, we develop ideas and behaviors and communication related to that. So it really, in a nutshell, tells us that we're social beings and we learn socially from observing one another. We construct knowledge based off of observation and modeling, what we see, what's communicated to us visually. From a media perspective, entertainment education has corroborated Bandura's assertions by telling us that SLT occurs through mediated programs and devices. What entertainment education is, in a sense, is it tells us that we can enact positive social change to educate people within society, which is just a really fancy way for telling us that we can use entertainment to educate people. We can provide these very profound topics or these very life-changing topics through entertainment to educate people and hopefully enact positive social change. One recent example of this was in the Girl Meets World series on the Disney Channel when they explored Asperger's syndrome and one of their friends possibly being diagnosed with Asperger's, and explored it all from a very positive way, and going through the diagnosis process and things of that nature. Some more formal ways when this first occurred, it occurred through the telenovela show Simplemente Maria. So Miguel Sabato is really behind the entertainment education idea, and what he told us is that through Simplemente Maria, it was one of the most famous telenovelas of the time in the 70s or 80s, they were able to empower Mexican women to see that they could live outside of their families, which was not a norm at the time, could be single, successful working women. And through this telenovela, they took Maria, this aspiring fashion designer, from nothing in a rural village to the big city where she aspired her dreams. And they dealt with a lot of very stereotypical situations that would happen, her dealing with a lot of issues between men and women during that time, and explored that through a series of episodes. And what they did this in a research perspective. They showed that they can enact positive social change through educating people through entertainment. This was replicated in the Soul City series that launched a radio series in South Africa, where they explored the issue of domestic violence and taught people how to respond to domestic violence in their neighborhoods through this entertainment radio show. So what they've found is that entertainment education is used very positively, or social learning theory is applied very positively to enacting social change and educating the masses about something through entertainment. And so when you go through your readings this week and you're looking at social cognitive theory of mass communication, that's really what Bandura is getting at when he's explaining to us. He's showing you how this relates to mass communication and how this classic behavioral theory has some communicative applications within that. So those are the two theories that we learned this week. They're both very relevant, and either of them could be explored in a deeper fashion. If you want some personal information about entertainment education, I have a lot of it. I can send it to you. Email me if that's what you want to look at. So entertainment education is a sub-theory or its own kind of communication strategy that could be used in the critical review that comes from social learning theory. Just to recap, here's our readings for the week, chapter 6 and 7 in our media effects text, as well as we're beginning to read our social constructionism text. We're watching a couple of videos on some of the theories we reviewed this week. You have a critical review post that's due on Thursday, and the replies are due on Sunday, and your digital media project midterm topic is due. The topic is due this week. We'll have formal instruction on what to put in the paper for that midterm next week. If you have any questions, let me know. I pray you have a blessed week, and I look forward to interacting with you online.